Hey guys, it's about 4 a.m. here and I can't sleep. Um, I keep thinking about this startup program that I was rejected by, and I figured it was a good idea to just get up and make a video and really just examine this feeling out loud. Um, it was a funding program for Siift, and we didn't get accepted, and I'm not too disappointed, to be honest. It's not the end of the world or anything. I've been rejected by lots of startup programs before, but I know I'm not the only one who goes through that. And I guess I just wanted to kind of talk to all the founders out there who feel rejected or kind of isolated or feeling like they're going crazy and nobody gets it, and maybe even doubting um, their mission, that it's completely normal, and actually it's worse now than ever because normally, these programs, um, they mean well and they try hard oftentimes, but they just have way too many applicants and something like a 1% acceptance rate. And I'm talking about like accelerator programs, investors, other types of support that small businesses get, small business owners can get. And nowadays it's even worse because there's more and more founders thanks to things like vibe coding and other phenomena, which is great, right? Like we're seeing a lot more businesses being created. We're seeing a lot more people doing their own thing. And while that's beautiful, it's flooding the market and it's making it even harder for people to stand out, whether that be to customers or to investors or programs that can help them. And so this feeling of resentment, this feeling of rejection, this feeling of being ignored, um, I think is a really important thing to think about and focus on because going through the founder journey, the early stage founder journey is very bipolar. I've seen it with a lot of people. I've gone through it myself a bit, and essentially you're nobody and you're ignored and you're kind of crazy, and people don't really pay attention to you um, until some point where maybe you get some investment or you hit certain milestones or you make the right connections, and all of a sudden you're like a celebrity and everybody wants to talk to you and everybody wants to reconnect and um, yada yada yada, right? And that's no shade on those people. It's just the reality is it's very hard to know who to spend your time with and how to kind of like sift through opportunities that you find as an investor, as an accelerator program, as a startup, as a potential co-founder, whatever. But this feeling of essentially like zero or one, or this situation of winner takes all, where the vast majority of startups and founders and people get ignored, and a very, very select few um, get some attention, I think is very toxic, and I think it's very problematic because it harbors resentment and it perpetuates this very, you could say, unequal or unfair distribution of support for these builders and for these companies. And I don't want to get political about it, um, but I think that if we could support more early stage founders somehow, I don't know how yet, but if we can do that, um, how amazing that could be for the whole economy, for all of society, because we would enable more and more people, especially people maybe from um, underrepresented or underestimated backgrounds, right? People from minorities, people from different socioeconomic backgrounds to actually contribute and bring things to the world that just haven't really existed or haven't really been able to come about um, before. I think that would change the world for good. I think that, you know, a lot of the inequality that we're seeing in the economy or in the business world at the top in the big companies, where you have a few big companies who basically make all the money and carry the stock market and et cetera, et cetera. I think that a lot of um, that unfair distribution and that big distribution that we see is seeded or um, perpetuated from what happens in the very early stages of business formation and in the early, very bleeding edge of the economy, which is the innovation economy or the startup sphere or the entrepreneurial kind of world, right? So maybe it's just food for thought. But to me, if we treat our entrepreneurs and if we treat our founders in this very binary, bipolar way of ignoring 99% of them and then just like completely praising 1% of them, I wonder how that perpetuates the inequality that we see at the larger end of the economy and in the overall market, where we have these huge companies and really only a couple of them um, are making tons of money, and it's a very winner take all type of situation. So I don't want to get too off topic, but when it comes to founders, um, you know, if you're going through rejection from maybe an accelerator program, or those investors aren't calling you back, or you can't seem to convince people to uh, contribute or pay attention to your idea yet. Um, of course, you know, you should look for feedback and try to improve, but at the same time, I just want to say, you know, you're not alone. And those really tough things that you're going through, that, you know, all of us go through to some extent or another, they don't have to be blockers and they don't have to push you down. They can be a filter. They can separate you from maybe your competition who just doesn't want it as badly, or somebody who was riding a wave and just trying to have a good time or look for a shortcut. But if you're a builder who is really serious and really determined to succeed in a certain space, and you face this rejection or you face these challenges, I'm sure you've heard of it. Sorry, there's like cats here or something. I'm at a resort in Mexico. Um, but yeah, if you're one of these founders that's really serious about succeeding and doing what it takes to succeed, um, I would just say that these feelings of rejection and uh, misunderstanding that you go through, these feelings of rejection and misunderstanding that you go through, they um, are not they shouldn't be taken personally. That's unfortunately how the game is played right now, and we want to change that. Of course, I think many people do, um, and I know personally, I'm just trying not to harbor resentment or take it um, too offensively, because a lot of the investors or people that you're reaching out to, they don't. A lot of these investors or programs that you know you apply to, they don't. They just don't have the bandwidth to really sit down and fully understand or fully uh, review what you're sending them. You know, they have countless applications, probably 100 times more applications than they can truly digest. Think about that. I don't know if you've ever hired anybody, but the same way. hiring is an extremely demanding and exhausting process where you have a very tough time looking at every applicant that comes in the door, and you're looking for a way to kind of streamline that process. I would imagine fundraising or funding as an investor or accepting someone into a startup program has a very similar amount of demand and is a very tough process to do robustly. So, yeah, when you get that fun rejection email from the accelerators that says, hey, blah, 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 unfortunately, we didn't select you because it's not a good fit for us, but it's not a reflection of the quality of your application or what you're doing, and blah, 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 blah. Um, don't take it personally. Don't take it personally. Yeah. Hard, easier said than done. I mean, here I am, unable to sleep in the middle of the night, making a video about being rejected from some startup program. But at the end of the day, uh, it's a numbers game for them, and there's simple supply and demand here. So it's not your fault. It is unfortunate, and hopefully you get the next one. But that's a slippery slope too, because I've probably applied to over 100 programs across the different startups that I've been in over the last 10 or so years. Um, More if you're counting, investors, and the constant rejection that you get can really take a toll and wear you down as a founder. And even now, after you know it happening to me countless times, I still feel bad, or I still, get upset a little bit about it, or disappointed at least. But you know, um, it's just a slippery slope because I think a lot of founders spend too much time on these programs or these applications, and too many founders are basically asking for permission to grow their business, or to even get their business going. Whereas I think a lot of the businesses, especially nowadays with all the modern tools that we have, don't really need that much capital to get going. And they don't necessarily need um, the advice or the mentorship of those people. I think that a lot of those startups can now bootstrap, or, seed strap is the other term that's kind of popular. But I think a lot of companies need to start focusing more on building a viable business rather than optimizing for accelerator applications. You know, um, it's a very addictive process, and it's very slippery slope because you know I've been there, I get it, but you think every time that, okay, this application is different. Okay, this time I finally articulated my vision really well. This time I was able to really offer a compelling like pitch, and they're going to accept me, and I'm going to be off to the races. But when you look at the odds, 99% aren't accepted into programs. Again, these are outdated odds. Those numbers are going to get worse. It could be 99.9% pretty soon, I'm sure. But um, I wonder what percent of bootstrapped startups fail. Or I wonder what percent of bootstrap startups don't make money in their first year. And of course, some businesses require capital, and there's a whole different conversation there. But for the ones who really don't require that much capital, or require less capital and help than they think, I wonder if those numbers are the same. I wonder if 99% of those also fail, or 99.9% of those also don't make it. Because here's the issue, right? The bootstrap founders, the quiet ones, the ones who aren't constantly trying to make headlines and don't have investors to appease, and a whole venture theater to participate in, they're quiet. Those success stories are underreported, or at least under um, kind of broadcast. So it's very hard to know, you know, what percent of businesses like that are succeeding and if that's actually an easier path. But my suspicion, pure speculation on my part, is that it is an easier path, and it's a path that's only getting easier with modern tools. So if you're a founder dealing with rejection from investors, from startup accelerator programs, or really any other type of ecosystem support, I would encourage you to just find ways to bootstrap and basically stop asking for permission to be a success. You know, that might be a bit blunt, but honestly, I think um, a lot of the success that you seek comes from after you take the lead and prove that you deserve that success. You know, insert your cliche business school advice here, but demonstrating value or offering value first is a tried and true way of getting people's attention and of succeeding. And yeah, long story short, I think that as an industry, when we think about the way we treat 99% of founders, all founders, really, because all founders in the earliest days face some type of rejection, face some type of misunderstanding, face some type of really negative experience, whether it be from investors or accelerator programs or uh, even the market. That builds a resentment, or that can really negatively impact how those successful founders, never mind the unsuccessful founders, kind of progress and evolve in the world. You know, this like really disgusting social norm of basically being this ignored pariah weirdo founder until you quote unquote make it and reach some arbitrary level of success, and then everybody starts treating you like a celebrity is, in my opinion, exactly the kind of dogmatic it's exactly the kind of dogmatic um, sheeple type behavior that we want to reject as founders, that we want to fight against as entrepreneurs or innovators, you know, following the crowd and creating this mainstream buzz around somebody just because they were on Forbes, or they got this rubber stamp from this other household brand name, or et cetera, et cetera. I think is a very shallow and very um, yeah, I think it's a very shallow and it's a very short-sighted way of fostering leadership in our business community. I think it's a very shallow and a very short-sighted way of fostering leadership in the business community to treat, you know, 99% of founders, to treat 99% of founders as nothing, or not give them the light of day, and then to completely praise and shower the other 1% or 0.1% or whatever the number is, right? Because it harbors this resentment in those founders, even the successful ones. It's a very bizarre experience to go through as a successful founder, because you feel like all of a sudden, like, the world has changed around you. You went from being ignored and people not returning your calls or not really saying yes to you, to all of a sudden everybody's reaching out and, oh my god, so like we should definitely reconnect, and absolutely, let's get you on that panel and blah blah blah. So that change and that contradiction and that I guess you could say completely like 180 in the way that people communicate or treat you creates a lot of skepticism and creates a lot of distrust, and it creates a lot of skepticism and a lot of distrust and a lot of uh, I guess just general dysfunction in the business world when those people make it, and as they go up the ladder, they see that this is the game, that they see that it's not about merit, they see that it's about, who you know rather than what you know, and they see that there's just a lot of theater and fakeness and bullshit that runs the game. And I'm not going to, pretend or claim that we're going to be able to change that, at least not overnight. But I think it's important to call out bullshit as a founder. And I think it's important to be able to see that treating people in the business world from the very beginning of their journey, that that unequally is only going to propagate inequality later on when those people are running larger businesses or their business grows or whatever you may have. So I think if we're looking for equality in the economy, we should at least, in part, start in the entrepreneurial world and in the founder world, and of course, merit and competition um, uh, will dominate there. But I just wonder what would happen if we gave um, more founders a chance, just to prove themselves, just to show what they are able to do. And um, yeah, I mean, to close, I think, this is not a criticism of investors or startup accelerators or any of the ecosystem supporters. Um, I think that a lot of them do really, really important and great work. And a lot of the issues that I'm calling out are just the consequence of the economics of the situation, right? You just have way too much demand and not enough supply. And you're only human, you can only be spread so thin. So, how can we expect these ecosystem supporters to be able to handle every single person who has a whim of an idea, or who is maybe trying to take away our time from a more important or at least more trustable um, startup or business that we could help to succeed. So, yeah, I think that, the issue is endemic. The issue is endemic to the industry and the state of the, I guess you could say, innovation economy. But there is something that, ecosystem supporters can do as well to help try to foster change. And I'm sure there are many of them who do try to do that. So yeah, I encourage. So yeah. Anyways, I just wanted to take a moment to articulate and really examine this feeling of rejection and this essentially chasm that's widening in the startup industry, or between founders and between ecosystem supporters and founders, and maybe give some food for thought to people on some of the ways we could make it better.